At some point, the internet convinced us every cartoon we grew up with was secretly a tragedy. Nobody could just be a cartoon character. They were dead, or dreaming, trapped in purgatory, or secretly dealing with something way darker than we ever imagined. And some of the theories sound like they were made by someone who maybe drank a little too much Mountain Dew and then found Reddit for the first time.
Chip, I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew!
But every once in a while, one of them made just enough sense to mess with you. So today we're counting down the top 5 creepiest cartoon conspiracy theories. Tom and Jerry were secretly friends. Now this one's not really creepy, that's why it's starting the list off. It's more like cartoon workplace fraud. The theory goes that Tom and Jerry don't actually hate each other. The whole cat and mouse game is basically an act. Tom has to chase Jerry because he's a house cat. That's his job. If there's a mouse in the house and Tom's just sitting there doing nothing, eventually they're gonna get a cat that's gonna do something. So Tom chases Jerry. Jerry beats the hell out of Tom. The furniture gets destroyed, the humans yell, and somehow the next day they're back to doing the exact same thing. Which starts to make the whole thing feel less like enemies and more like two co-workers pretending to be busy when the owner walks in. Because if Tom and Jerry solve their problems with communication, the cartoon would be over in 4 minutes, and MGM would have to find another way to torture a cat. Then you have old rocking chair Tom. Tom's getting older and slower, worse at catching Jerry. So Mammy brings in a new cat named Lightning, and Lightning's not like Tom. Lightning's fast and serious. He's there to do the job, and that changes everything. Because Jerry suddenly realizes that Tom might be annoying, but Tom's also predictable. Lightning's different. Lightning is an actual threat. So what happens? Tom and Jerry obviously team up to get rid of him. And that's the entire theory right there. The second the house gets a cat who actually takes the job seriously, Tom and Jerry basically unionize. And then there's the lonesome mouse, which makes this even funnier. Jerry gets Tom kicked out of the house. He finally wins. Jerry's living the dream. Then he realizes something awful. Life without Tom's boring. There's no game anymore. There's no chase. Jerry got exactly what he wanted, and somehow it made his life worse. So he helps bring Tom back. Imagine finally getting rid of your biggest problem in your life, and then going, I actually miss the structure. Tom and Jerry aren't written like two characters trying to end each other. They act like two characters trapped in a routine they both secretly need. Together they have a system. A violent system, a deeply unhealthy system, a system where one of them gets hit with an ironing board every 6 minutes, but still, a system. Two absolute lunatics in the longest running workplace scam in cartoon history. And maybe the real reason Tom never catches Jerry is because catching him was never the point.
We interrupt this program to bring you Courage the Cowardly Dog Show!
Courage the Cowardly Dog was just a scared dog. This one doesn't even really feel like a theory. Feels like anyone who's ever owned a nervous dog watched the show and went, yeah, that tracks. The idea is that Courage isn't living in a world full of demons, aliens, curses, evil barbers. Instead, Courage is just a small, anxious dog, and we're seeing the world through his eyes. So maybe the creepy man at the door is just a normal stranger. Maybe the terrifying creature in the yard is an animal he just doesn't understand. Maybe the reason everything feels like a horror movie is because to Courage, everything outside of his farmhouse feels like a horror movie. Dogs are dramatic. A plastic bag blows in the wind and he'll square up with it. Someone knocks on the door and the dog acts like the FBI just breached your house. A guy in a hat walks down the street and your dog's convinced the neighborhood has a new villain. That's Courage. But I think there's another version of this that goes a little deeper. What if Courage isn't just imagining monsters because he's scared? What if the monsters represent things people are scared to deal with? Fear, greed, shame, control, loneliness. All the ugly little human emotions that adults pretend aren't in the room. Because that's the weird thing about Courage. The monsters are insane, but they feel like something. They're not just random creatures showing up to be creepy. They feel like anxieties with faces. Take Freaky Fred. Fred was terrifying. The voice, the smile, the rhyming, the way he says, naughty, like he's about to become the subject of a documentary. As a kid, Fred feels like a monster. But technically, he's Muriel's nephew. He's just a person. A very creepy person. A man who shouldn't be allowed within 50 feet of a playground. But still, a person. Because if you were a tiny nervous dog and a strange man came to your house and Eustace locked you in the bathroom and he starts trying to shave you while narrating his own villain origin story?
It was a day I'd not forget. the day that I first met my pet.
You wouldn't see him as Muriel's odd relative. You would see him as the devil with clippers. But on a deeper level, Fred's not just scary. Fred's compulsion hiding behind politeness.
I'd never seen such hair before.
He smiles, he speaks softly, he acts like a proper guest. But underneath all of that, he wants to be naughty. He wants to shave. He has this urge that he keeps dressing up in manners and rhymes. That's what makes Fred so uncomfortable. He's not just dangerous because he looks like a monster. He's dangerous because he doesn't. Then there's the Hunchback of Nowhere. And this one's important because it flips the theory. At first, the Hunchback looks like the monster. He shows up in the rain, he looks strange. He doesn't fit into the normal farmhouse world. Your first reaction is the same as Courage. What is that? But the Hunchback isn't evil. He's lonely. He's someone who's been treated like a monster for so long that the world stopped asking if he actually was one. Because the real ugliness in the story isn't from the Hunchback, it's Eustace.
Ah! Didn't I tell you we got no place for the likes of you?
Eustace sees someone differently and immediately chooses cruelty. Courage sees someone different, feels fear, and then chooses kindness. So if the creatures in Courage represent parts of the human psyche, the Hunchback represents rejection, the fear of being unwanted, the pain of being judged before anyone knows you, the loneliness of people looking at you and deciding what you are before you even have a chance to speak. And then there's King Ramses' curse. This is one of the scariest episodes for me as a kid, but it's also one of the simplest. Return the slab.
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
That's it. That's the whole moral universe of the episode. Something was stolen and it needs to be returned. Eustace refuses because he's greedy.
He said $1 million slab, and that means I get $1 million.
And the curse keeps coming back. That's not just a ghost story, that's guilt, that's consequence. That's what happens when someone knows the right thing to do, refuses to do it, and then shocked when the universe comes knocking at the door.
All right, but $1 million's as low as I'll go.
Ramses is scary because he's supernatural, but he's also scary because he's correct. Return the slab. Fix what you did. Give back what was never yours. And Eustace still chooses greed, because of course he does. Once you start looking at Courage this way, the monsters stop feeling random. Fred is compulsion. The Hunchback's rejection, Ramses' guilt and consequence, and you could keep going. The mask deals with trauma turning into hatred. The demon in a mattress is... okay, sometimes it's just a demon in a mattress. But the point is, Courage the Cowardly Dog was never just about monsters being scary. It was scary because they felt familiar. They felt like things people carry around. And Courage is stuck in the middle of all that. A tiny dog in the middle of nowhere, trying to protect people he loves from the ugly things that get thrown at them. But maybe that was only half of it. Maybe Courage saw monsters because he was the only one honest enough to see what people really carried around with them. And maybe Courage was never cowardly. It's about a dog who sees every terrifying thing under the surface and still goes anyway.
Odd parents, fairly odd parents. Wands and wings, floaty crowny things.
Timmy Turner's fairies were just coping mechanisms. This is where the cartoon conspiracy theories aren't as much funny as they are depressing. And this one starts to feel a little too real. Because the theory says that Cosmo and Wanda weren't actually magical fairy godparents. They were something Timmy created in his mind. A fantasy, a survival tool. Two magical adults showed up because the real adults in his life kept letting him down. As a kid, that sounds ridiculous. As an adult, you watch the Fairly Odd Parents and you go, wait, this kid's life's sad as hell. Timmy's life was terrible. He's a 10-year-old kid who's ignored at home, he's bullied, he's got a terrible babysitter, and he's constantly told that his problems aren't real problems.
Aw, look at that big orange basketball-shaped head of his sleeping. Good night, Timmy.
His parents love him, sure, but they go on vacation every single episode. Love doesn't help much when they leave him with Vicky.
Why aren't you miserable?
So the conspiracy isn't just, were the fairies fake? It's darker than that. It's asking, what if Timmy needed them to be real? Because when you look at it, Cosmo and Wanda give Timmy something that he doesn't have. They ask him what he wants.
That I could stay 10 years old and keep my fairies forever.
And for a kid whose whole life is like, where do you gotta go? Who's gonna watch you? What do you wish for is a dangerous question. And the big problem, Timmy's picked on for being small, pushed around at school and then sent home to be with Vicky. So what does he wish for? He wishes to be an adult. That's not just a kid wanting to stay up late and eat cake.
I wish I was older.
That's a kid thinking, maybe if I was bigger and older, people would start taking me seriously. And that's the whole show, hiding in the very first wish. Timmy doesn't want magic because he's evil. He wants magic because he has no power. Then you have channel chasers, which is essentially intergalactic cable before that was a thing.
Alien, invasion, tomato monster, Mexican Armada brothers, who are just regular brothers running in a van from an asteroid and all sorts of things. The movie.
Timmy's parents don't believe him about Vicky, so they punish him. They ground him from the television. And then they hire Vicky to enforce his punishment. So Timmy wishes for a magical remote so he can escape into the TV. And that's pretty wild. It's not just a cartoon adventure. It's escapism inside escapism. Timmy's a kid using television to escape his life. Inside a television show we were watching to escape ours. Which is either brilliant or I need to turn the lights on and go touch grass. But it shows how deep the problem is. Timmy's not running towards something, he's running away from it. From everything. And then there's Imaginary Gary. This one makes the coping mechanism theory feel way less random. Because the show tells us that Timmy used to have an imaginary friend named Gary. Before Cosmo and Wanda, it was Gary. A friend Timmy made up when he was younger because he was lonely and needed somebody to play with. So when fans say, what if Cosmo and Wanda are just another version of that? It's not coming from nowhere. The show already planted the idea that Timmy uses his imagination when he feels alone. Gary was an imaginary friend. And Cosmo and Wanda are something more powerful. Imaginary parents. Chaotic parents. Two magical adults that shouldn't be trusted with scissors, let alone reality-bending wands. But they show up and they listen. And the hardest part is where they hide. They're not real adults who can actually step in and help. They're just his goldfish. The only adults who consistently believe Timmy are hiding in plain sight. A kid sitting alone in his room after another bad day. And the only two people that ask how it was are his two friends in a fishbowl. Maybe the fairies aren't just wish fulfillment in a cartoon sense. Maybe they're wish fulfillment in the saddest sense. And you can feel that idea all over the show. When Timmy wants power over Vicky, that's not revenge. It's just a kid wanting some control. When he wants to be bigger, that's not a joke. That's a kid wanting to stop being treated like he doesn't matter. When he wants to disappear or escape or become someone else, that's not just random magic. That's a kid trying to wish his way out of being ignored. Because The Fairly Odd Parents was always about a child trying to bend reality until it finally treated him fairly. That's the title, right? Fairly. Not perfectly, not happily, just fairly. And every wish Timmy makes is just the same wish over and over. See me, believe me, help me. Ed, Edd n Eddy takes place in purgatory. This is one of those classic cartoon conspiracies, and I get why it's stuck around. Because Ed, Edd n Eddy already feels like a show you watched, half asleep on a summer afternoon with a headache. Everything's bright and sweaty and everyone's yelling.
Hold on it! Kevin, look out!
Nobody's drinking water, and somehow the whole neighborhood feels like it exists outside of time. The theory says the kids of Peach Creek aren't actually alive. They're trapped in some kind of purgatory, stuck in the cul-de-sac forever. That's why there's almost no adults. That's why it always feels like summer. That's why the kids never grow up. Because most of the show, the adults are basically ghosts. They exist, technically. Kids talk about their parents. Sarah threatens to tell her mom. Characters get grounded. Double D's parents communicate through sticky notes, like they're running a hostage negotiation through some other dimension. So you know adults are somewhere nearby, but you almost never see them. They're not characters, they're consequences. Your mom's not a person, she's a threat. Your dad's not a person, he's a job at the Jawbreaker factory. Every authority figure is just a voice from another room. And then there's the way time works. For a huge chunk of the show, it feels like endless summer. Kids wake up and they go outside, find some people, they do some scams, they get hurt, they get humiliated, and then they go home. They wake up and they do it again the next day. Same kids, same cul-de-sac, same schemes, same Jawbreaker dream. Not money for a car or freedom or anything that would change their life. Jawbreakers. That's it. That's the dream. The lowest stakes criminal empire in television history. And then the internet did what the internet does. It took a creepy feeling and built an entire haunted spreadsheet around it. Some versions of this theory say the kids feel like they came from different eras. Rolf supposedly comes from the 1900s and died after being trampled by farm animals. Johnny's placed somewhere in the 1920s, dying from tuberculosis, bringing Plank with him to the afterlife. Eddie's connected to the Great Depression, drowning while running away from angry kids from a scheme that went wrong. Ed and Sarah supposedly died in a car accident in the 1950s. Double D died in a gas leak explosion in the 80s. Kevin died somewhere in the 1990s. Jimmy died from leukemia. And the Kanker sisters are demons sent to torment them. Which is insane. It's supposed to be a show about kids trying to get candy. How did we end up in a neighborhood full of ghosts and demon trailer park girls? That's where the theory starts to get a little ridiculous. But the reason it survives isn't because the ridiculous part is the scariest part. The scariest part is that Peach Creek already feels trapped. The cul-de-sac is its own little universe. Even when school eventually shows up, it just feels like they're doing the same thing in a different place.
Save it, Blabbermouth! You're gonna blow our cash cow! If summer never ends, school will never start.
Eddie schemes, Ed follows, Double D worries. Kevin mocks them, Sarah screams, Jimmy gets hurt. Rolf says something that sounds like it came from some cursed farmer's almanac. And Johnny talks to his piece of wood. And the Eds go right back to chasing jawbreakers. The episodes really sell that trapped feeling. That's what makes the purgatory theory so effective. Not because every death backstory makes sense. Not because the Kankers have to be demons. Not because Rolf had to die in a barn in 1903 for the cartoon to work. It works because Ed, Edd and Eddy already captured something weirdly uncomfortable about childhood. The loop. The feeling that every day is the same. But yet it's the most important day of your life. So maybe Peach Creek wasn't just a neighborhood. Maybe it was childhood stretched out forever. The same sun beating down like no one was ever going to grow up. That's why it feels so creepy. Because the idea of being trapped in Ed, Edd and Eddy isn't scary because it looks like hell. It's scary because it looks familiar. It looks like that one summer you can still remember, but can never go back to. Nobody leaves, nobody ages, nobody moves on. They just wake up tomorrow. Back in the cul-de-sac. Still chasing jawbreakers. Still trying to make something happen. Still stuck in the loudest, weirdest, stickiest part of childhood. Forever.
That Sad is a bad guy. He's always watching you, keeping track of everything you do.
This is the big one. A lot of people have heard about this one. But this doesn't just say that one character was secretly sad. It says the whole show is built out of one little girl's loneliness. The theory says that the babies in Rugrats were never real. Tommy, Chucky, Phil, Lil, eventually Dill, all of them supposedly created by Angelica's imagination as a way to deal with neglect and family tragedy. Adults who were too busy to notice what was happening right in front of them. And this theory gets brutal fast. According to the darker version, Tommy was never born. That's why Stu's always in the basement building toys. He's not just an eccentric inventor. He's a grieving father building toys for a son he can't raise. Chucky supposedly died with his mother, and that's why Chaz is so nervous, so fragile, so overprotective. He's not just an anxious single dad. He's a man trying to live in a house full of absence. Phil and Lil were imagined as twins because Angelica never knew what the sex of the DeVille's baby was. So in her mind, she made both, one of each. And Angelica, being the only kid that can talk to the babies, is not really translating baby talk. She's not the bridge between two worlds. She's the only one in the room, talking to ghosts. Whatever she has to create to not let the silence win. That makes this theory darker than the others. Tom and Jerry being secretly friends is funny. Courage seeing monsters because he's scared is weirdly emotional. But Rugrats? Rugrats became a funeral we didn't know we were watching. Because the entire show is already about children trying to understand a world that's too big for them. Stairs are mountains. Backyards are jungles. Adults are giants. Normal family problems become adventures because the babies don't have the language to understand what's actually happening. And then you add Angelica. And Angelica's not a baby. She controls the babies. She lies to them and she scares them. She turns normal situations into disasters. She decides what the story is. In a normal cartoon, that just makes her the bratty cousin. But through this story, it makes her the author. It makes every adventure feel like something Angelica is making up in her head, so she can be the most important person in a world that keeps making her feel invisible. In Angelica's worst nightmare, Charlotte thinks she might be pregnant, and Angelica immediately spirals, because she believes a new baby will make her be forgotten. Angelica is not just afraid of having a sibling, she's afraid of being replaced. The episode turns that fear into a nightmare, where the new baby becomes this giant that takes over her entire life. Her toys, her room, her parents, her place in the family. And as a kid, you watch that, you go, ha, giant baby. As an adult, you watch it and realize Angelica thinks love is a limited resource. She thinks attention's something you have to fight for. She feels like if another child enters the room, there might not be enough room for her.
I warned you to get out, but you wouldn't listen.
That's where the conspiracy starts to really sink its teeth in. Because suddenly, Angelica bossing the babies around doesn't just look like bullying. It looks like control. If the babies are imaginary, then Angelica's built a world where she can never be replaced. A world where every baby listens to her, fears her, follows her, but still needs her. Even if they don't like her, they still orbit around her. And for a lonely kid, that might be enough. What if Angelica looked around at all these damaged adults and filled in the blanks the only way she could? What if Rugrats was never about babies having imagination? What if it was about Angelica's imagination? What if it was about one lonely child trying to populate an entire world? Because when you're little, the world doesn't explain itself. Adults disappear, people leave, people die. Families change, people stop paying attention. You don't get the truth, you get pieces. And when nobody explains the pieces, a kid makes a story. So were the Rugrats actually there? Even if you don't believe it, it stains the show. Suddenly Rugrats doesn't feel like babies sneaking through a house anymore. It feels like a little girl walking through a room full of adults, trying to make imaginary children loud enough to cover the silence.